The U.S. Constitution is the foundation of American democracy, and its impact can still be felt today in every aspect of American life. From the Bill of Rights to the separation of powers, the U.S. Constitution has shaped the country's values and political system. In this video, you'll discover some fascinating facts about the U.S. Constitution that you may not have known before. Whether you're a history buff or just curious about how the U.S. government works, this video will provide you with an engaging and informative insight into the Constitution's legacy. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to learn something new about one of the most important documents in American history. Make sure to subscribe our channel for more valuable videos. Separation of powers. Another problem facing the Constitutional Convention was how to divide the powers of a government. Who will make the laws? Who will make sure the laws are obeyed? Who will make sure the laws are good laws? These questions were answered in the next set of compromises. American government can be seen as a tree. The Constitution is the trunk, or base, with three branches extending from that trunk. Those three branches are the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Each branch has different responsibilities and looks out for and checks the other two branches. These concepts, respectively, are called separation of powers and checks and balances. The legislative branch was defined during the Great Compromise. Together, the House of Representatives and the Senate make the laws to govern our country. The legislative branch also checks the executive and judicial branches. The second branch is the executive branch. Eventually, the delegates decided to create a chief executive. Under the Articles of Confederation, there was no national leader. The Founding Fathers had feared creating another king. There was much discussion, even talk of having two equally powered leaders. The convention agreed to create one president, but only if the president would be checked or watched by the legislative and judicial branches. The job of the president and the executive branch is to carry out the laws passed by the legislative branch. The third branch established the judicial system. The judicial branch was to be headed by the Supreme Court. It is the job of the Supreme Court to interpret or define the laws. The justices of the Supreme Court are chosen by the President and approved by the Senate. The judicial branch checks the executive and legislative branches. Each branch has its own specific responsibilities. Each has a separate power. Part of the responsibility of a branch is to control or check the power of the other branches. That way, no one branch gets to be too powerful. Each branch is balanced. The legislative branch of the United States government is described in Article 1 of the Constitution. Its major job is to make our country's laws. The American system of government is based on a representative form of government. Not all Americans can meet in the same place at the same time to make laws, so Americans choose representatives to make the laws for them. Representatives carry out the will of the people, or they are replaced during the next election. Laws are passed by a majority vote. Majority means 1 over half. For example, among 10 people, 6 or more of them must agree in order to pass a law. The larger group of politicians is known as the majority, and the smaller group is known as the minority. If you are in the minority, you try to encourage members of the majority to change sides. The legislative branch of our federal government is called Congress. Congress is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. Congress begins its meetings on the third day of January every odd-numbered year. The meetings are called terms, and they last 2 years with a recess, or break, during the summer. The first term of Congress met from 1789 to 91. The House of Representatives and the Senate meet in different chambers on opposite sides of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. The Congress makes its own rules governing its meetings. It can expel, or remove, a member by a 2/3 vote. That means that 2/3 of the members, not just a majority, have to agree to an action. A record is kept of all the meetings and is published in the Congressional Record. Members of Congress also have certain privileges. They cannot be arrested when going to or coming from Congress or while attending a session of Congress. A member cannot be sued or punished for anything he or she might say in Congress. The Constitution goes on to define the individual responsibilities and requirements of the two houses of Congress. The House of Representatives and the Senate are lawmaking bodies. The larger House of Congress is the House of Representatives. There are 435 representatives in the House. The number of representatives a state has is based on the number of people, or population, in the state. There is one representative for every 500,000 people. So if a state has 2 million people, that state would be able to send 4 representatives to Washington, D.C. The term of office for a representative is 2 years. In order to stay in office, he or she must be re-elected every 2 years. To find out how many people are in a state, the government conducts a census, or count of the people, every 10 years. The first census was conducted in 1790. When will the next census occur? In order to be a representative, there are certain requirements to be met. A representative must be at least 25 years old, must be a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years, and must live in the state from which he or she is elected. Within the House, there are several leaders. The Speaker of the House is the presiding officer. The Speaker is selected by the members of the House and is usually a member of the majority party. The Speaker of the House is second in line to take over the presidency, after the Vice President, in the event of an emergency. The House of Representatives has the sole power to begin impeachment proceedings against a government official. To impeach is to accuse an official of some wrongdoing or misuse of power. The House begins the process by accusing the official, but the trial is carried out by the Senate. More about impeachment will be discussed in later chapters. The other house that makes up the Congress is the Senate. The Senate is the smaller of the two groups, with only 100 members. These people are known as senators. Each state, regardless of how big or small, has 2 senators. Currently there are 50 states, so we have 100 senators in Washington, D.C. Each senator is elected for a 6-year term, but every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election. For example, in 2004, 33 senators were elected for 6-year terms. In 2006, 33 others were elected, and in 2008, 34 were elected. This way, there is never an entirely new group of senators. There will always be some experienced senators to guide the newcomers. According to the original Constitution, the senators were chosen by their state legislatures, but in 1913, the 17th Amendment changed this and allowed the people to elect their senators directly. In order to be a senator, there are certain requirements that must be met. A senator must be at least 30 years old, a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years, and live in the state he or she represents. The Senate also has certain leaders. The Vice President of the United States is in charge of all meetings of the Senate as the President of the Senate. He can only vote in the event of a tie among the senators. If the Vice President is absent, the senators choose an alternate presiding officer known as the President pro tempore, temporary president. The President pro tempore is third in line to take over the presidency in the event of an emergency. With regard to the impeachment process mentioned in the last lesson, the Senate acts as the jury and tries any impeachment cases. When the House of Representatives accuses an official of a crime, the Senate decides whether or not the official is guilty. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court acts as the judge when the President of the United States is the one being accused. 2/3 of the senators present must find the official guilty in order to remove him or her from office. Rules, rights, and privileges of Congress. Each House of Congress develops a set of rules for its members, but the Constitution also sets forth specific rules and rights. In order for a meeting to be held, there must be a quorum. A quorum is one person over half of the number of members. For example, for the Senate to have a quorum, there must be 51 senators present, 1 over half, 51 1/100ths. The same is true of the House of Representatives. 1 more than half must be present to have a quorum. The House and Senate may expel or remove a member for breaking its rules. To expel a member, 2/3 of the House or Senate must agree to the removal. The House and Senate publish the notes, minutes, and records of their meetings in what is known as the Congressional Record. Both houses of Congress must meet in the same city and must meet during the same time. How bills become laws. The laws, or rules, our country has were passed to keep our country functioning.
There is a long step-by-step process in the making of laws.
Before a law is a law, it is known as a bill. A bill is an idea that a representative or a senator has that he or she would like to see become a law. A bill may start in either the House of Representatives or the Senate, except for money bills, which must start in the House. Let's say Senator X has a bill to proclaim June 21st as National Cardinal Day. He takes his bill in written form to his fellow senators, and it is given a code number. If the other senators disagree with the bill, they vote it down, and the bill is dead. If they agree, the bill is passed over to the House of Representatives. The bill is given to the House of Representatives to discuss and vote on. If they disagree, they vote it down and send it back to the Senate for changes. If the Senate refuses to make changes, the bill dies. If the House approves the bill, it is given to the President for his approval. If the President agrees with the bill, he signs it and it becomes a law. If 2/3 of the Senate agree with the bill, that is called overriding the President's veto. If the Senate votes to override the veto, then the House of Representatives must vote whether to override it also. If both houses vote to override the veto, then the bill becomes a law without the President's approval. Powers of Congress. The Constitution gives the Congress, the House and the Senate, certain specific powers. Among those listed in Section 8 are the powers to tax, borrow money, regulate commerce, trade, and naturalization, the process by which one can become a United States citizen. Also included are the powers to coin money, establish a system of weights and measurements, establish post offices, declare war, and provide a military. These are many of the important powers specifically granted to the Congress. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, is very important to the Congress. It is known as the Elastic Clause. The Elastic Clause gives Congress the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper to carry out its responsibilities. The powers given to Congress can be broken down into three areas: enumerated powers, implied powers, and inherent powers. Enumerated powers are powers specifically given to the Congress by the Constitution. They are written. An example would be the power to declare war. Implied powers are powers given to the Congress that are general. They are stated, but not enough information is given in the Constitution about details. An example would be, the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7 states, to establish post offices and post roads. Obviously, more is needed to run the post office than just roads. There are the mail carriers, security, and buildings. The Constitution assumes that the Congress will take care of these matters. 2. Inherent powers are unlisted powers that a government must have simply because it exists as a government and needs to run its affairs smoothly. The best example of this is the need to conduct foreign affairs. The Constitution does not discuss foreign affairs, but because the United States is a country, we must deal with foreign countries diplomatically. Limits on Congress and the states. We saw in the last lesson what powers the Constitution gave the Congress. Now we are going to look at what the Constitution told the Congress it could not do. First, the Constitution told the Congress it could not make any laws outlawing the slave trade until 1808. This clause deals with the rivalry between the northern and southern states. Eventually, this rivalry erupted into the Civil War in 1861. The second limitation deals with the legal term known as habeas corpus. Habeas corpus literally means, you shall have the body. This right of habeas corpus allows a person to be seen and heard in a courtroom by a judge. If you are to be found guilty or not guilty, you have the right to appear in court. The government cannot take that right away except in cases of rebellion or invasion. The Constitution outlawed bills of attainder. A bill of attainder is a law passed by the government that convicts a person of a crime and punishes them without a trial. Another limitation set by the Constitution is that Congress cannot pass ex post facto laws. An ex post facto law punishes people for a crime that was not a crime when they did it. For example, Mr. Z was smoking a cigarette on his lawn on Monday. On Tuesday, Congress passed a law forbidding smoking in the United States. Wednesday, the police came and arrested Mr. Z for smoking on Monday.
When Mr. Z smoked on Monday, it was not a crime.
Under the ex post facto clause of the Constitution, punishment of Mr. Z is forbidden. Other limits on Congress are that it cannot tax products exported from a state, it cannot give preference to any state's seaport, government money can only be spent by passing a law, and finally, Congress cannot issue titles of nobility. That means the Senate or House cannot make people knights, lords, or duchesses.
The Constitution also puts certain limits on the states.
First, they cannot make treaties with other countries. Secondly, they cannot coin their own money. Finally, they cannot do the items mentioned in the above 3 paragraphs. The powers of government can be put into 3 categories: delegated, concurrent, and reserved powers. Delegated powers are powers that are given to the national government in Washington, D.C., such as the power to declare war. Concurrent powers are powers that are shared between the national and state governments, such as the power to tax. Finally, reserved powers are powers that only the states have, such as the power to create a school system. It is important to keep these different powers in mind as we discuss the remainder of the Constitution. Thank you for watching. We will find more information in the next video.